I'm delighted to join you today to talk about a product that's very dear to my heart, Hispanic Life in America. I'm proud of it for a lot of reasons, one of them being that it is so unique. We had a big vision for this product, and I believe we executed on it very effectively, and that's what I want to show you today. There's a reason this product has been very successful. It's already, even after less than a year in the market, installed in many, many libraries across the United States and even overseas. And there's a reason for this, and that's what I'd like to focus on today by showing you the product, giving you a little bit of context about what's inside of it and the tools we've created for users, and helping you understand how you can use it for your patrons and your scholars and your students, whoever they may be, to understand the story of Hispanic Americans more effectively. So what I'd like to do is share my screen, and I believe I'm doing that now. Are a few details around how the product was built, why we did it that way. And of course, we don't have a huge amount of time today, so I'm not going to go into great context and depth. First, the mission of Hispanic Life in America. It has a real purpose behind it. We had a vision for it. We knew we had the news and primary source assets to build something very unique, and so we did. Most of the story around that, of course, is the content. As you learned from Catherine a moment ago, we are an aggregator of news, and in fact, the largest aggregator of news anywhere. We've been collecting news of all kinds for 50 years, and that makes it possible to create, in this case, a very unique offering. I'm going to jump right in, but first I'll tell you the heart of today's presentation, our discussion, is a live demonstration. So I'm going to show you 3 slides very quickly, then go right into the product and show you how it works, do a few sample searches, and get you comfortable with it. So I said it's unique, and I'll even say it's a groundbreaking product. The intention here, and I think we achieved it very nicely, is to tell the entire story of Hispanic Americans from the very beginning, and of course that history goes back a long way, to today, and even to tomorrow. And to tomorrow because in this case, we invented a new product model. Many, many primary sources here, 50 million individual documents, but it gets refreshed every day. Something you haven't seen before available from publishers or from aggregators or from library researchers and publishers of this type, an entirely new model. Inside Hispanic Life in America, there are 50 million individual primary sources. And as I mentioned, we refresh them every day. And I'll show you how in just a moment. And to give you an example of what you're going to see, we have newspapers, very many newspapers naturally going back in time into the early 18th century, but also other kinds of news, blogs and videos, audios, transcripts, editorials, podcasts, retrospectives, whatever they happen to be. We collect and we provide every kind of these resources. Moreover, we have what I call hyper-local resources. Because we've been building content sets for so long, we have content coming from nearly every place in the United States and even now across the globe. So wherever you are, whatever your town or your region or your state or your county, there's a very, very good chance that we have extremely deep and unique coverage of Hispanic American life there and reactions to it and related content. Nobody else can build anything like this. And that's the main point I wish to make. It's unique, and you're going to see that in just a moment. So what's inside? What's the matter, the meat of the thing? Well, hundreds, and that's kind of astonishing, hundreds of historical Hispanic American newspapers from the earliest times, meaning the early 18th century, the early 1700s, to the very most recent past. We've been collecting those for decades. Only we have been doing that. Same thing for Latin American newspapers, hundreds of those. I mention them because they are essential for understanding the story of Hispanic Americans because of the migration of Hispanic Americans from somewhere to this place. And very often that somewhere is Latin America. And of course, Hispanic Americans often keep very close ties to the country where they originated or to family there. Hence this whole umbrella of content sources from both the United States and Latin America to tell that story. But also, in addition to the historical papers, meaning papers that are no longer being published, over 100 current Hispanic American news sources, and astonishingly to me, nearly 17,000, that's right, 17,000 other news sources, and I don't mean items, I mean sources from the United States and around the world. And many of these have very deep back files. which means you don't just get the current coverage, but you get coverage of Hispanic Americans that may go back 100, even 200 years, even though the source is still being published. A couple other real important points. More than 9 million content items inside Hispanic Life in America are in Spanish. And of course, we're adding more every day. And the other thing that's inside HLA that you'll see in a moment are user tools. We develop new kinds of tools to make it possible for every kind of user, whether a very high-end academic or scholar, or a younger student, or a public library patron, whoever it happens to be, to give them paths to discover the content. Otherwise, it's kind of hard to use a really giant research database. I think we all know this, we've experienced this, so we built something to make that much easier. Why do I believe that your community of users will get benefit from this product? Well, it's an unassailable resource in my judgment for casual study or for deep research. You'll see that. And it is the broadest and deepest and most comprehensive resource ever built by far, covering the story of Hispanic Americans. And as such, to my mind, it is emerging and becoming, and in fact is now in some libraries, a real cornerstone product, getting lots and lots of usage and lots of buzz, as they say. It's a great experience for users too. So I'd like to show you why that's the case by moving into the product itself and giving you a little bit of a tour. Okay, I've moved to the product interface. There you go. And you can see it. Here is the home page, as we call it. I want to point out one really important thing here. These words here, the experience and impact of Hispanic Americans. Hispanic Life in America doesn't just cover politics or government or events that are in all the textbooks and such. It has all of that and more. It also, though, covers the story of the people, the Hispanic Americans themselves, from everyday people to pop stars and sports stars, poets, novelists, theater people, activists of all kinds, scientists, scholars, all of them covered in great detail because the news covered them. And we have that news and we make it really, really available. I want to show you one other thing before I dive in. Here is the tool, which I'll walk you through in great detail, or better detail, I should say, in a moment, that we call suggested searches to help your customers, your users, your patrons navigate this really enormous content set of nearly 50 million items. And I'll show you how this works in just a moment. But first, what I'm going to do is an empty search. Nothing in the search box, going right to search, to give you a sense of what's inside. Called up every content item in this database, everything. And you see, there you are, nearly 50 million items. And it grows every day because we add new content. And wow, here's the evidence. I want to show you this right off the bat. September 22, we have advanced copies of many, many publications to keep this product as current as possible. And here you see American History, a very distinguished publication. Same thing, Civil War Times. Hispanic Americans, of course, participated in the Civil War in lots of ways. Here you see coverage that is not yet even widely available. So this is what the current content goes up to, the absolute today and even tomorrow, and we add new content every day. But let's go back in time just for a second. Okay, now you are seeing the very emergence, the very first records in the news of Hispanic Americans in the Americas, not even the United States at that point. Boston, May 15th or May 22nd, 1704. Boston, June 1704, and you can see what this content looks like. These are the original documents. Absolutely original, and of course, they look different from content today. I don't have time to go into a lot of detail to show you this, but I want you to have the sense today that we go that far back, covering all the matters from the beginning all the way through yesterday, today, and tomorrow. Let me show you as well, since we're on this page, some of the tools that have been built to make it easy for your users to navigate inside the collection. We have, of course, date selectors. You can navigate by oldest, newest, all the usual and customary. But our content at NewsBank Redux is so well tagged that we can identify, is it an audio, a blog, college, university paper, journal, magazine? I could go on. Newspapers obviously being a majority. Everything carries a descriptor or a tag to make it possible for your customer or user to navigate more successfully among and between the types of content and formats of content of greatest interest. This impresses me a great deal. Source name. This is a navigator to help the user get to the source, perhaps in his own hometown if he wishes to do so. But I want to point out right now the kinds of material we have here, not available in any other collection, much less in Hispanic Life in America. It's very impressive. For example, we have absolutely definitive coverage from the Miami Herald, El Nuevo Herald. You see here some others, the Latin American Wire. These are representative of the deep back files we have and current content as well for these particular newspapers. And these are just examples. Others are the Atlanta Journal, Cleveland Plain Dealer, Detroit News, Fort Worth Star-Telegram, Houston Chronicle, Sacramento Bee, San Francisco Chronicle, and dozens of others. And these are our deepest back files of current papers. Very rich. I'll open that just for a moment to give you a sense of what that looks like. Because your users, your customers, your patrons can navigate among and between these content types and sources very successfully using these tools that we have built. So here you see, for example, I can enter the name of the source or the location of interest, my own hometown if that's what I want to do. And there's a good, strong likelihood coverage will be found. And you can see again here 17,849 sources. Let me just jump to a random page. Here you see the global content. Colombia, CNN International, Qatar, and of course some USA sources, Brazil. Here are others from outside the USA. Very, very deep and rich. Here you see Australia. I show that just to give you a sense of how deep the content set is. Nothing else like it. You can search by location, and note too, we've got a lot of content from North America, which includes Mexico in this case, for example, South America, even Europe, Asia, and more. Here I think it gets really impressive by language. English, of course, is the dominant language of newspaper publishing in the United States and in some foreign countries as well. Spanish, though, is vital to your users' understanding of this story because so much of that story is told in the Spanish language. You see here, nearly 10 million items in Spanish, and of course, Portuguese and others. The point is a very rich selection of content, very deep, going from the very beginning of the history of Hispanic Americans all the way up to today. One thing I want to point out before I move on, these content sets, whether they involve English language, French language, Portuguese, Spanish, they all search the same way as well. So your user won't get lost. And we've written particular software and editorial scripts to make all of the Spanish content as findable as any content in the English language. So with that, I want to show you the most important thing I want to share with you right now, the most important thing today, and that is the tool we built called Suggested Searches. These are paths to discovery. It can be hard for certain types of users, unless you're a really experienced scholar. It can be tricky to understand, how do I start understanding the story of Hispanic Americans? Here's the answer. Let me show you a few examples. What we've done is create a set of what we call suggested searches. They are guided paths created by editors here at NewsBank, expert editors who understand the history of Hispanic Americans, to bring the user straight to a good, strong selection of content covering his or her particular interest, or perhaps suggesting an interest to a student or a user who doesn't really have an idea in mind yet, but knows he or she wants to explore. So here's an example. Under the large theme of Spanish arrival to Texas annexation, meaning the beginning of the story to 1845, we created a category called International Affairs, clearly very important thing for the history of Hispanic Americans, and a subject, annexation of Texas. So you see the structure, main topic, related topic, primary topic. So let's have a look. Annexation of Texas, 1845, a very important event in the history of Hispanic Americans. And here you see, it defaults to best match, but you can go newest or oldest. And as it happens in this default, we have asked the machine, we have written the script to focus only on this time period, and that's visible to the user. So he or she can change those parameters and drops the user straight into a very rich and deep content set. Here's 670 results. The user can expand or contract that as he or she wishes to do. And here you see the early examples of this from 1845, 1844, 1844, 1845. and have a look at the variety of papers covered here as I go through quickly. Albany Evening Journal, the Emancipator and Republican, New Hampshire Gazette, the story covered everywhere. So I'll show you a couple more of those just to give you a sense. So let's jump in here. Cuban independence to the Mexican Revolution. Let's look at international affairs again. And you can see here, let's just jump into the Mexican Revolution because it ties nicely with that last example. And again, you see the structure here. We have all kinds of things that can be opened up or closed by the user because we have so many options. So let's jump into Mexican Revolution. We're in the time period of the early 20th century, of course. Here, wow, look at that, 23,389 results just from this time period, just on this single topic, Mexican Revolution. I love this because the customer, the user, your patrons can expand this now or change it to, let's say, 1970 to 1990 and get reflections and retrospectives on the Mexican Revolution. Here we're dropping the user into a place where he or she can get started, and that's the idea. And all of these tools here above are advanced search tools that can be used to create a new search based on the one that we prepared for the user himself or herself. And here you can see all of the navigation tools that I showed you a moment ago stay with the user the entire time. So you can now go to look perhaps at Central American sources or North American sources, or I want to see what was happening in San Antonio. What did Houston think about this, or Buffalo, or hundreds and hundreds of others? I hope that gives you a sense of how this can become so hyper-local. And that's, of course, especially true for the most current content. So I want to finish up with just a couple more examples because it's so important, I think, that everyone understand the power of this resource and the power of this tool that we have built here. Let me jump into this very important event, Cuban Missile Crisis. I'll just take here, civil rights and activism. Naturally, for Hispanic Americans, concept of civil rights is very important. So are immigration and citizenship, particularly important. Here, let me open up civil rights and activism and show you something you might surprise you. El Teatro Campesino, the Farm Workers Theater. This example shows, again, the power and the breadth of the kind of content that we have available in this collection. Again, you couldn't find this elsewhere, and nobody has the kinds of tools or the paths that I'm showing you right now. 824 results from a very narrow time period on this particular event. It's the beginning of a student's or a user's or a casual public library patron's discovery of something brand new that he or she could not see in this format or drill into in this manner until now. Last, I'll show you just one more thing, again, to demonstrate the power of this tool. Elian Gonzalez, and let's look at this important matter of immigration and citizenship. You can see the extraordinary amount of content we have and the number of paths here. Let's take a look here at nationwide immigration reform protests span 8 weeks in multiple major cities. And here again, an example from the more current time period of the richness of the collection, of the types of content we have, of the variety of sources, Houston Chronicle, Star News, Beverly Press here, the Morning Call from Allentown, Pennsylvania, just about everywhere. And again, all of the tools that follow. And if you're interested in Spanish versus English, you can work through that as well. So that is my story. And that's what I wanted to share with everyone today concerning the product. I'll close my demonstration by opening up this most recent set of suggested searches, because this is the one we keep current all the time, because the story of Hispanic Americans is changing constantly, being refreshed and renewed with new people, new personalities, new events. So as you can see, arts and entertainment, have a look at this just for a moment. Cardi B, look at the names here. These are all hand-created, very nicely crafted searches to help introduce each of these people or concepts to the user or customer. Business, it goes on and on and on. There are, in fact, hundreds and hundreds of these guided searches here, just to give you a really good sense of this. I'll close with one very last thing. On the homepage of Hispanic Life in America, and it follows the user throughout the experience, is a wonderful link. I'll just open it up because I believe many of you may be taking trials of the product, and thank you for that. This link takes you to a description that's suitable not just for librarians, but for users to help orient them to what's inside this product. So I encourage you to take a look at this. It covers some of the main events. It's a good introduction, and it also shows a few search strategies to help users become more successful. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. We wish you great success with Hispanic Life in America and a good celebration of Hispanic Heritage Month. Thank you.